Hello and welcome to The Cine Skinny, the podcast from the people behind the Skinny magazine. It's Jamie Dunn here. I'm sitting in for Peter Simpson, who is off sunning himself and listening to Charlie XCX in Barcelona, the lucky boy. But never fear, Annie Burrows and Ellie Robertson are in the studio with me, so it's all good. How's it going, guys?
It's going good.
Yeah?
Good.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm okay. Very underprepared for this episode and a bit worrying since we haven't actually seen a lot of the films. But but we will make it through, guys.
It's going to be fine.
And he's had COVID.
Yeah. We're all definitely doing well.
Yeah.
It's going okay.
But it's going to be a fun show. So we're going to be talking about a really big, expensive film. Well, I am, actually, it turns out. And a tiny indie film. But coincidentally, they're both about marauding gangs of road warriors fighting over natural resources. So there's definitely a bit in common there. So that big film is George Miller's bombastic revenge saga Furiosa. The small film is Weston Razooli's nostalgic kids adventure Riddle of Fire. But before we get into those films, what's everyone watching?
I've not been watching much. I rewatched The Matrix because I was kind of on just a bit of a weird Wachowski's spell, which we might actually be talking about later on today. But there's it's kind of like, you know, when those films that are just absolutely unequivocally incredible and then there's just nothing to be said about them? Like, what could I possibly weigh in on The Matrix, which is considered one of the best films of all time? I suppose one thing is that, like, I think that a big part of why The Matrix was so successful when it was released, right, was that it was like the greatest action film of all time, right? The Wachowskis had directed an action film, the likes of which people had never seen. It was, the storyboard was a 600-page graphic novel that was like created by two underground comic book artists. Like, the level of detail in the shots and the sense of like movement is borrowed a lot from like anime and manga and video games and all these things that like action directors hadn't really like taken in their stride. So people were just like, you know, their minds were blown by the special effects and the sheer scope. But like, I've always found that like the action, like by the very end of The Matrix, when we're in the helicopter up in the sky and it's like blowing up and there's just these huge explosions, like I always find that kind of the driest part of The Matrix. The way more interesting to me is like the first half, where it's this really like disturbing sort of like speculative fiction rabbit hole transgender allegory. But yeah, all round, just an incredible film.
Yeah, it's probably why the later ones don't work as well, because you don't have that like going down the rabbit hole, because he's already in the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
you know? So you've got to like just, it's more sustained.
I can't really remember much about any of the other Matrix films. I've not seen like the fourth one that came out recently.
I really like the fourth one, but I don't super love the second and third one.
Yeah,
I know people are quite divided, but it felt like it had the most similar structure to the first one, in that there was like a going down the, like they literally played that, what is it, the Jefferson Airplane song, what is that?
White Rabbit.
Yes, yeah, that one.
Yeah, I don't really remember much about the second and third ones, and I've not gone on to rewatch them because I just don't have as much interest in, you know, CGI robot jellyfish flying around like shooting each other with lasers. Like, that's not as just hugely impressive as the first film. But I don't know, maybe I remember there's like a highway scene in the second one with the two guys in white coats who fly around.
Pretty epic.
That was a pretty good scene.
Yeah.
That's what I remember from that. But that's it.
Yeah, I've never revisited them.
Yeah.
Either. But yeah, the first one's just is a perfect film.
Yeah.
Annie, what are you watching?
What have you been watching?
I mean, you've been ill, so you've probably been watching lots of crap. Is that not what?
Yeah, no, that is. Yeah. No, literally, I had a text from my brother who recently got Letterboxd and was like, "Why are you watching so much shit? Like, what's been good for once?" Which is very sobering. But what did I watch? I rewatched After Sun because I chaired a Q&A for it at the Cameo. That was nice.
How'd that go?
Oh, it was really nice. I love Charlotte Wells so much.
Yeah, that was a total surprise. She wasn't going to be there. And
she wasn't going to be there. And then they like emailed me 2 days before and she was just like in town for a family thing.
Oh, nice.
And I am just like obsessed with her. I think she's so cool. So that was nice. And then I watched as much of The West Wing as I could watch until the foreign policy gets really racist and I have to like back out. So I've never seen beyond really the third season of The West Wing because I'm just like, I'm not doing this anymore. But I watched the first 2 seasons, which was great. And then I watched Working Girl.
Oh, yeah, I love that film.
I've never seen
Melanie
Working Girl.
Griffith?
Yes, yeah, and Harrison Ford.
And Sigourney Weaver.
And yeah. It's like such a good cast. It just felt like very quintessential, like, you know, the platonic ideal of an 80s film, like the shoulder pads are padding. The hair is fucking amazing. And it was just the main thing I remember about it, obviously, is it was just like quite sexy in a way that, again, you wouldn't really make films like that anymore. You know, like it was very much built on chemistry. There's this one bit where he's like kissing her. He just can't get his shirt off. And these days it would just be like so slick and so choreographed. And it's just like really, it's nice. Yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah. When I went to New York, I really wanted to go on the Staten Island ferry just because of that film.
Yeah,
but like
yeah.
I was told, no, that's a waste of time. Don't go to Staten Island.
No, I've heard that. Did I do this actually? I can't remember. I think I got on the Staten Island ferry. I definitely got on some kind of public transport because that's the way that you can see the Statue of Liberty without it being like a big kind of expensive tour and then you have to like get off. Like if you just get on like one of the boats, like the public transport boats, I think it's the Staten Island ferry, and then you just like go pay it and it's like, oh, it's nice, and it's like $5 or something.
I think it's free.
Is it free?
Yeah,
oh, then there we go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also got obsessed with the song. Do you know the song at the end, "Let the River Flow" by Carly Simon? I literally played that every morning to wake up, and I just pretended it. During the pandemic. I don't know. There was some. I watched that film again. And I loved it so much.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
What do you love about it?
It's just like that perfect kind of like 80s. You know those kind of 80s movies which are just like low budget, kind of mid budget, kind of like just like really charismatic actors, and that's it. You know, like I always think of that in like Tootsie or like Broadcast News. You know, that kind of like
Broadcast News.
you know, and just like sexy, funny, just like everybody's just acting up a storm, but it's not like, you know, it's not trying to sell me anything. It's just really fun, charismatic people on screen. In the 90s, films became like rom-coms became much more kind of formulaic, I think. You know, much more like kind of Nancy Meyer style. But that kind of, there was a kind of period in the 80s where like they were just golden.
It feels like grainy and like, there's something like very sort of embodied and
but it doesn't have the, it's weird, it doesn't have the, it's something about the 80s because it doesn't, the 70s ones are a bit more gritty and a bit more dark. And then the 90s ones are a bit too soft and fluffy. But the ones in the 80s, there's something, they just hit different. I don't know.
I will say the 90s ones for me are more the quintessential like Julia Roberts, which has a bit more of that kind of like 80s vibe. The Nancy Meyers, because I also watched It's Complicated. This was the film that my brother texted me about. This was his limit. I watched It's Complicated, which I think is from like 2009, 2010. And that's Nancy Meyers. And it's just not good is the thing. Like, it's just quite boring. I've always really struggled, apart from the Parent Trap, I've always really struggled with Nancy Meyers films because they have that kind of weird, glossy sheen to them. And everyone's kind of terrible, which is fine. But they don't seem to actually like each other or fancy each other, which is not fine for a romantic comedy. And I've just never really got on board with them.
So what did you give it on Letterboxd?
I think I gave it 2.5 stars. Maybe 2. No, I gave it 2 stars. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Nancy Meyers goes down when she starts directing. Like I think when it's like somebody else adapting her script. Like Private Benjamin is one of my favorite films of all time.
I have not seen that.
Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's like Goldie Hawn goes to the army.
Oh my god!
And like it's like so good. And like she doesn't direct Salute Seattle either, does she?
No, that's Nora Ephron.
Oh no, I'm mixed up. Oh.
Yeah, because Nora Ephron is fucking great.
Yes.
And then Nancy Meyers is not. It's like the difference to me is like New York and LA. Like they're the kind of coastal like divide.
Anyway, but very, very good comfort movies when you're ill.
Yes.
I watched another talk about perfect rom-coms. I watched The Apartment for like the millionth time. Watched it with my husband. I was a bit disappointed he wasn't like, I just saw it then when she's running from the Chinese restaurant like towards like, you know, like Baxter and like, oh my god. But
as you should. Had you seen it before?
No, and he didn't really react. So I was a bit disappointed. But,
and how do you feel about that, Jamie?
I thought we were going to be making like spaghetti with like tennis rackets and like he's going to love it. But no, he wasn't interested. So, but
marriage is not what they sell you.
But I have been watching Scavenger Rain on Netflix, which is really good. It's like a weird animation about a bunch of astronauts who get stranded on this really dangerous planet full of like weird creatures, and some of them have like this kind of like weird, I guess, symbiotic relationship with the planet. Like they start to like get in tune with it and others don't. There's a weird thing with a mind reading toad that is suggesting one of the guys. It's very strange. A robot is going all creepy. I love it.
It's one of those things that I think that science fiction is getting really, really good at, which is lots and lots of world building that happens over the course of 1 second. So like in an establishing shot where our characters are just like in the background or in the distance and we're about to go to them, you'll just see like a flower come alive and then eat something and then get eaten by something else. Like you see these weird ecosystems of bizarre alien life just play out instantly.
And that's really what it's about. There isn't actually much of a plot. They're trying to get to like one spot, but most of it is really about the like fauna that's trying to kill them all.
And there's the robot who like has like damage to its circuits. I think it's been a while since I've seen it, but like
it's got like a kind of like mold growing in it from the planet, and
so she has to like constantly ask it to like, so what is our mission? What are we here for? And the idea of like a robot with like a degenerative brain disease is just so interesting to me. Okay, I don't know, like good science fiction, really good science fiction.
I'm a big fan. So Furiosa. So I think it was 2015, George Miller resurrected the Mad Max saga with Fury Road. I think to most people's surprise, it was a massive success. Miller had turned his weird kind of punky apocalyptic vision up to 11, and the results were really jaw-dropping. It was an amazing action film. It was adored by critics. It was adored by audiences. The star of Fury Road wasn't Mad Max, though. It was Charlize Theron as Furiosa. And this new film, a prequel, I'm not sure we really wanted or needed, but it's here, is a prequel to that film telling her origin story. And she's played by several actors in the new film, including Anna Taylor-Joy. Chris Hemsworth co-stars as Dementus, who's this Svengali-like leader who has a gang that enters Furiosa's orbit. Tom Burke is a surprise in the film. He's like a cool road warrior who takes Furiosa under his wing. And the film follows Furiosa over 15 years in several chapters as she tries to survive this demented future vision of Australia, which is looking closer and closer like the real world with each passing year. I was going to pass to Anna here, who was meant to watch this film.
But I had COVID. So hang on. If you pass.
Well, the question is actually, are you a fan of Fury Road? I guess.
And was I looking for a sequel? Oh my god, I can't answer this.
Yeah, I think so.
I love Fury Road. I think it's so fucking sick. I think it's so cool. I keep trying to get people who aren't action film fans to watch it because I think the pitch of it, I have quite a few people in my life who are like that. And it's like, oh yeah, it's like Mad Max. Like it's this kind of like gritty, oh, it's cars. And I think some people think of it as like, oh, it's like Fast and the Furious in Australia or something. I'm like, no, you don't fucking understand. There's a man with a guitar and he's on a fucking truck and the truck is on fire. It's so sick. I fucking love Fury Road. So I am really curious. I did really want to watch this, but I unfortunately, very much had COVID. Those lines were so dark as well. Like I did a second test at one point. I was like, we could leave. And it was like, stay in your house, bitch. So I could not go. But I'm really hyped for this sequel. I'm really curious to hear what you think about it because I don't know if anyone was necessarily looking for like a sequel, prequel, second film, but I have heard that this was written either before or at the same time as Fury Road. And Charlize Theron actually said to George Miller that like, maybe we should make Furiosa first. And he was like, no. So then I'm like, oh, it doesn't feel like a kind of capitalizing on it in the same way.
My understanding was actually a bit like The Matrix. I believe there was a kind of like animation. Do you know how like The Matrix has this, is it Animatrix? That was made this kind of like series of short films that kind of like...
Not the Animaniacs.
Not the Animaniacs.
Which fuck.
That's also good. It's animated. So it's like, yeah.
But that came out after The Matrix.
Yes, but it was so there was a kind of parallel kind of animation plan, but I think because Fury Road was such a success, I think they decided actually we're going to make a film instead. So it was going to be like a kind of like I think it was going to be a series of animations by different people like telling these chapters.
Okay.
But so we now have a movie instead.
So how is the movie, Jake?
Well, since I don't have much to say about the film because I haven't planned that much, I'm going to tell you the weird story of trying to see it. Because I went to the first... I went on the first...
no, I'm here for this. This is so good.
I went on the first weekend, right?
What did they do to you this time, Jamie?
I went on the first weekend and it was just so... You know like what it's like to see a film now? Like everything's in like 4DX or on those kind of weird 2DX screens, which you don't even know what they are. So it's actually quite hard just to see a normal 2D screening. So we decided to go to see the subtitle screening instead because that was the one that was available in a good time. And, you know, I don't mind subtitles. So it was like, I guess caption for like, kind of like deaf audiences, that kind of thing. So I went along to that, all started fine. And then, like, clearly there's no subtitles. So somebody went out and complained. And I don't know, like, can Cineworld please hire projectionists because the amount of fuckery to get this going, they shrunk the screen down to, like, we were watching it, honestly, we were watching for 20 minutes at this kind of size, while they were trying to fix it, and then they brought it back up, and then they made it huge, so it was like so close up on their face.
And they were just playing the film this whole time.
They tried to start it a couple of times, and each time they did this kind of weird shrinking and expanding thing.
Oh dear.
And it was like, I'd seen the first, like, 20 minutes I think 2 times all the way through. We left because like it was just ruining the experience, and like I was like doing my whole rant.
I'm so sure.
Because like she's like, oh, would you like a refund? I was like, yes, I want a refund, and I want like popcorn. I want everything.
Thoughts and prayers for the Cineworld staff.
So yeah, I mean, actually, they were all really nice and they sorted out. But I was like, I just don't know why did they just cancel screening. Some people just sitting there watching it. I don't know how they could have put up with it. It was like it was very annoying because it's such a visually stylish film as well. Like, how can you watch it in this kind of weird like letterbox version or close up? It was very silly. But luckily they just put us into one of these 2DX screenings, which was actually fine. It just means a bigger screen. It didn't actually. It wasn't.
Is that the one where the like screen like comes round?
I believe it is for some films, but normally it's just a very big screen. So like I think for like some movies it's special design so that the walls light up or some weird stuff.
Yeah.
Which sounds horrible.
It does sound horrible because a film isn't designed for that.
Yeah.
So either you're just seeing like a weird bleed out of the film, which would fuck with your head, or you're just not seeing like the film is split.
You're missing
across
bits.
3. Yeah. Which is very, I don't understand it.
So it was just...
It would maybe work for challengers because you're supposed to watch a tennis match like that.
Oh my God, true.
Turn your head left and right.
Exactly. Well, it worked because it was just like a big screen. It was actually very nice and it was quite quiet. And yeah, it looked great. But I've got to say, I did walk out a little bit disappointed, because Fury Road was such a knockout movie. Seeing it on the big screen was easily one of my top 10 ever film experiences. It was like totally blew my head off. And this just never got the blood flowing in the same way. There is one section which kind of redoes Fury Road and kind of ups the ante a little bit, and I love that section, but otherwise the film... Yeah, it's just trying to do different things. And part of the problem is this is an epic film. It's set over many years. It's got a lot of story to squeeze in, a lot more kind of mythology of the place. And I'm sure, some people like that, but I don't think it's Miller's strong suit. The best thing about the Mad Max films tends to be that, the best ones tend to be the kind of fat-free ones, which are just kind of pure action. And obviously Fury Road was essentially just one long action scene that gets to one location, then goes right back in the opposite direction. So yeah, this film doesn't do that, which is disappointing. And I did leave it thinking, it just wasn't as good. It's just not also, it just doesn't look as good. I don't know what they've done, but the cinematographer just doesn't sort of have this. It also does a mistake, but because at the end of the film, it actually replays Fury Road and like at speed. It shows you like clips of Fury Road, so you basically see like a fast forwarded version of Fury Road at the very end of the film. So it's actually going to spoil Fury Road if you haven't seen it. So definitely see Fury Road before you see Furiosa.
I've heard that the CGI in this is not good.
There seems to be more CGI. It's not even the CGI I would complain about, because actually even just the like normal scenes just aren't filmed as beautifully. There's just something about it. It's not. I was going to say, actually, I did tweet about this. So the cinematographer is a guy called Simon Duggan, who's made films like I, Robot and The Great Gatsby. So he's making sort of films in the modern age, and I feel like maybe because it's this is still shot in 35mm, maybe he's not used to shooting 35mm or something. It just doesn't look as great, because the previous guy who shot it was John Seals, who made Talented Mr. Ripley and Witness and films like that. Talented Mr. Ripley is one of the most gorgeous films ever made. So yeah, it makes sense that he would make a beautiful Mad Max film. So I think that was part of the problem. But funnily enough, as the week has gone by, it sort of has grown in my mind, and I've came to the conclusion what I like about Mad Max and as a series, because it is one of my favorite series, is like each Mad Max film is actually very different tonally. So the first one is like just a pure revenge film. The second one's like a really amazing action film. The third one has Tina Turner, and it's crazy.
I've actually not seen any of them apart from Fury Road.
Oh my God, you should definitely see them. Like,
is the fourth one Thunderdome?
The third one's Thunderdome.
Third one's Thunderdome.
With Tina Turner,
right?
I don't like Mel Gibson. I mean, who does like Mel Gibson?
Yeah, I mean, he's Mel Gibson. Like, if you like, I guess I saw all those before. I knew Mel Gibson was a dick. He was one of my favorite actors for a while. He was doing he was like a really good actor. And he's obviously a very beautiful man as well. You got to admit it.
Yeah, back in the day.
Yeah. So like, I guess all those were made before we knew he was a crazy anti-Semite. So maybe we can overlook that. And maybe. Well, I don't know, when did he turn? Maybe he was fine up until 1990. And then Tina Turner turned him right wing. I don't know.
I cannot wait for the lawsuit.
Anyway.
Peter's gone 1 week.
Anyway, I don't think you can get a lawsuit after what some of the stuff he said on
I
tape.
think you saying that maybe Tina Turner made him anti-Semitic
Converted him.
maybe is. That's the
No,
lawsuit.
we love Tina here. But anyway, I do love the series, and I think I appreciate that he tries to do something different each time. And I've started to like some of the images from that film and some of the ideas I have like kind of like begun to like fester in my mind, and I've started to think about it a bit more. And it does, and I think it does have some great stuff. I would say one thing is really good about it is Chris Hemsworth is fantastic as the kind of villain. Like that's one thing that Fury Road doesn't have. It has lots of like weird, fucked up characters, but it doesn't really have a interesting villain in that we know much about him. Whereas Chris Hemsworth's dementia is his name is? Dementus is really funny. He's like essentially Trump. He's this kind of like guy who's like an idiot who manages to get a mass following and keeps fucking things up. And it's like clearly there is sort of some parallels with like current political leaders. But he's really funny, and I think he's kind of wasted in like the Thor films. He's like clearly a great comic actor, and
apart from the third one where he is really
well, that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
he's funny. Like he's much more interesting as a funny guy than a action hero, I think. So I'd love to see him do more kind of weird roles like this.
I also heard rumors that Tom Burke is really hot.
Yeah,
Please confirm.
I guess so.
Okay.
Like, he's not my cup of tea, but
Okay.
he's fine. He's like he's fine. He's basically just like a watered down Mad Max. Like his character's not particularly interesting. Like that's part of the problem with the film. It's kind of rushed. He's meant to be like a really significant character in Furiosa's life, but he's only on screen for like 10 minutes. Like he's not like that significant. So he doesn't appear to like the third or fourth chapter, and then I'm gonna say what happens to him, but there's just things like that. It's like feels a bit rushed, a bit unsatisfying, but then when I take it as a whole, I appreciate what Miller's trying to do.
Yeah.
So I love Miller. I love the fact he's just, let's face it, this is just much better than any other Hollywood action film. I'm kind of marking it on a curve compared to Fury Road. So if you go in expecting a film as good as Fury Road, you will be disappointed. But if you go in expecting a film that's better than half the shit out there, that is full of crazy images and sort of wacky characters and sort of a really, intense, fun atmosphere, which is trying to say something about the world, then you're gonna have a good time.
Okay. I want to go see it.
Yeah.
I'm convinced. I was convinced before.
And watch all the other Mad Maxes as well.
Yeah. We'll see.
Just watch Thunder.
Can you watch it by itself? Like you don't have to.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're all kind of standalone. I probably watched them all out of order when I was a kid. Like I think I probably saw Thunderdome first, like, and then I went back and saw like Mad Max and stuff. So
Okay, great.
I think they work.
Okay, all right.
So letterbox rating. That's kind of pointless. I think watching it at the time I was like 3. I was angry, but actually, in retrospect, it's a 4. It's like a really good film. It's just not Fury Road.
Okay.
So
And you were fucked around.
and I was annoyed. Yeah. Higher projectionist people. Riddle of Fire from first-time director Weston Razooli follows 3 mischievous kids: Alice, her friend Hazel, and Hazel's kid brother Jody, who are getting up to no good near the end of the summer vacation when they are asked by Hazel and Jody's sick mother to go and get her a blueberry pie. When the local bakery is out of pies, this simple errand turns into an epic medieval quest for the pie ingredients, which brings the trio into the path of an illegal poaching taxidermy cult led by a witch. Yes, it's that type of film. It's shot in 60mm. It's sprinkled with like medieval music and mythology. Looks great. Ellie, what did you make of this one?
So I think this film is like a really successful exploration of a kind of long neglected aesthetic, which is the family fantasy adventure film, which sort of used to be all the rage in like the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. I don't know what happened, but like, there's not been a Princess Bride since Princess Bride, you know what I mean? And it's so strange as well, because science fiction, which is kind of the twin of fantasy, that's just unquestioned in modern cinema, right? Like nobody bats an eyelash if there's a new Alien film or a new Dune film or a new Alex Garland film. Whereas like, I don't know what happened with all of the great sort of like fantasy film. Maybe like Peter Jackson blew them all out the water or something like that.
Dungeons and Dragons is the only one I can really
Dungeons
think
and
of
Dragons has been quite successful.
But it's more kind of meta, it's like not actually pure fantasy.
Exactly. And even the big fantasy franchises like Harry Potter and Pirates of the Caribbean, they're all sort of like 1 degree divorced from the definite article, right? You don't get any really earnest sort of full-bodied fantasy films anymore.
Lord of the Rings is maybe the last time.
That's sort of what I thought, like maybe because Lord of the Rings was just so fucking good that like no one's going to try and top that. No one's going to try and design their own chainmail or whatever for a fantasy film.
Oh, they really tried though, but just badly.
Yeah.
I think it also transitioned into television, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it then became like Game of Thrones, where
Yeah.
it's all like very dark and gritty, and it's definitely not for kids anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas I kind of really like this idea. I like the idea of kind of like a more underground art house film that is just also being a really successful like family fantasy adventure. So I think that like Weston Razooli does know like how to kind of invoke that sort of nostalgic look. Like you say, it's shot in 16mm, so it has that great sort of like grainy look, but also a lot of the cinematography of, I think it's Wyoming it's set, so like the Pacific Northwest, like just the trees that go on forever. It's so green, it's so mythical. Reminds me a lot of George Lucas, who did like Willow and Return of the Jedi in the California redwoods and stuff like that. And all of the title sequences and subtitles are in this neon green, like Tolkien-ass font, you know? It's so like fun and mythical and indulgent. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know how it would play with like young audiences or parents. It's strangely kind of like between those two worlds, I think, because like they're kids, sure, and they're all kind of like Goonies who are going on this adventure, and they all have like little paintball guns and gadgets, and you know they just sort of like don't question the fact that they're up against an illegal poaching operation. But at the same time, there's a little bit of like, I don't know, maturity to them. There's one point where they've been stowing away in this truck, and the wee girl like cuts her way out of the tarp that goes over it and like surveys this like strange, like distant woodland mountain they've been driven to. And after a beat just goes, "Where the fuck are we?" And it's just like the kids themselves are actually really, really charming and fun to watch at every time. You don't have high expectations of an experienced acting performance from them, so you can kind of enjoy them just being rascals and like, I don't know, running around set and being weird. That said, the film feels a little too long, and I think that's because as much fun as it is to see these kids running around, and as beautiful as the cinematography is, and as sort of fun and you know, magical as it feels to like meet all these new characters and go to all these interesting places, a lot of the time we like cut away from the kids to follow this cult, this like strange, mysterious you don't know if they're like meant to be a witch coven or if they're just meant to be like, you know, criminals or whatever. But like all of their acting's really shit. It's like there's no excuse for that. They're all grown-ups. Like and it can get a little bit grating when we spend loads and loads of time away from them. And I think that, you know, talking about George Lucas or whatever, like, you know, it was a similar thing where he hired like relative unknowns, which is a practice that I always really like from directors. I always like seeing like new actors who don't get seen a lot. I don't believe you should stunt cast star power just to drag in audiences. I think that like unknown actors can do just as good, if not more of an interesting job. But I do really feel like how George Lucas got Alec Guinness in Star Wars to kind of like act as the morale for the crew. Like I really feel like that's what this film was possibly missing. Like the closest that you get is Leo Tipton, and their character is the leader of this, like the witch cult poacher people. But as such, like they're meant to be kind of like otherworldly and disconnected, and even like they sort of like talk to their minions like drones, and they just sort of respond unemotionally. It's all quite monotone and hard to get through. So it's like, yeah, it's quite a it's quite a long film for that reason. It's about 2 hours long, and it's not that there's any one scene that I feel like we could do without. We go from the mountain to this like strange, weird nightclub, which is like a massive tonal transformation for the film, because it's like the first place the kids are definitely not meant to be. There's loads of like funky dressed grown-ups sitting around chain smoking and drinking 40-ounce bottles of beer and stuff like that, and it's like that it also feels like an adventure. It also feels like a where is this going? And it's something that you wouldn't want to get rid of. It is just that like each sequence itself, we divert between all these characters, and it takes so long, and kind of the charm of the film does eventually wear off. So I do think that aesthetically it's a success. I think that it's a really pretty film. I think that it's really just immediately intriguing and engaging, but that does wear off because it just doesn't have like a really strong central performance. Or, you know, I don't know, it just drags on a little bit. So I'd be interested to see what the director like has going on in the future. I think that it's definitely something that can be improved on.
All right.
I love films with Leo Tipton in them because I remember watching them on America's Next Top Model when I was a kid. That was like how they kind of got their big break in the industry. And they were always like really sweet and really charming. And I think they're really good. Like every film I've seen them in, they have been really good. And whenever they crop up in something, I'm like, oh my God, bestie. You're doing so great. So that was really nice. I interviewed the director for this last week. And one of the things that we were talking about was like this, like what draws him to this kind of like fairy tale genre. Because I think some of his short films are also fairy tale adjacent. And he was talking about how like the fairy tale enables you to do almost every single genre, right? Like there's romance, there's action, there's fantasy, there's horror. Like you can kind of throw everything at the wall. And this film really has that sense of everything being thrown at the wall, like in the best possible way. It feels like a film that is like for children, it's about children, it's by children, again, in like a really lovely way, that it has this kind of real, we just want to do everything. We just like love everything. And there's a kind of anarchy and chaos to it, which, yeah, I really, really like. I like how material it is, like how tangible, like the film print rather, is really, really beautiful. Like the grain of it, like just looks really gorgeous. But there's also a really interesting tension in the film between this idea of like analog and technology, in that you watch the film and you feel you should be in the 80s. Like you just immediately are like, oh yeah, obviously, like that's when this film is set. And then they're pulling out their little smartphones and all of this stuff. And the very first scene is them stealing like a Game Boy or some, I don't fucking know what these game things are called. My parents didn't raise me like that.
Yeah, it's called an Angel. I don't think it's a real game.
Okay, some kind of thing. And they're like stealing that. And it's kind of, I like how it thinks about childhood as this world of like open possibility. And there's a nostalgia to that, but it's like, no, you can still have that now. You can still have that with the tools that you have now. That's something that's inherent to childhood. It's not inherent to like an old version of childhood. And I thought that was really lovely. The kids are really funny. Yeah, I agree with you that it is too long. Like the pacing, I think, is a little bit off. I think it could have maybe done with a slightly sharper, like slightly more ruthless edit maybe in parts. It feels it should be a 90-minute film. And the fact that it's not a 90-minute film feels a bit like, okay, all right. But it is really lovely. I think also, if I remember correctly from the interview, and this might be wrong, so don't quote me on this, but I think this was one of the first films to be accepted at Cannes in the, because what did it run in? Was it it wouldn't have been in the competition.
I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I can't
Critics
remember.
Week or one
maybe
of those ones?
Critics Week.
Director's Fortnight.
Director's Fortnight, yeah. So it was like, I think one of the first ones to be accepted for the Director's Fortnight, and he just like submitted it himself, which is also just quite like a nice kind of how a festival should work, right? Like someone makes something good, they're just good at it, and then people are like, yeah, that's sick. That's nice. What did you think, Jamie?
Oh, I'm going to feel like a bad guy now.
Oh, let's fucking go.
Rip those kids apart.
I was going to say I loved this for the first 20 minutes. I think the kids are so charming. The opening is great. This kind of wordless kind of heist of a warehouse. The scenes in the supermarket where they're like trying to get ingredients, just endlessly charming. The kids are funny. Like the kids have like some laugh out lines. There's a couple, like I think what was one of the best insults I've ever seen on film was like he says one of the characters, "You look like a jug player in a hootenanny band." Like, my God, what an insult! And it just kids saying "bastard" is funny. They call everything bastard. Very, very, very cool. The kids are like great, and actually really like funny. Like even one of the kids who, I don't know if he's got like a speech problem or something, but like he kind of mumbles his lines, and all his lines are kind of translated. It's just like a funny little gag,
Yeah, apparently he just didn't realize when, I think I read this somewhere else, when he like cast him because he was like such a good kid, and then on the first day in set he was like, fuck, he's like younger than I thought and he can't speak that well.
Yeah.
And then was like, oh, we could just subtitle it and it'll just be like a funny little thing.
Yeah, and it's really funny.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, and that kid was particularly good. I thought, even though like I think that's like sometimes you can see good direction of children, because like it's like you have to make film play for them, and it's clearly those kids were having the time of their life.
Yeah.
And you can that kind of joy and kind of exuberance just bursts off the screen. And the film has that kind of feeling of like it feels when it's at its strongest, it kind of feels like a kid's imagination. That's how kind of kids play. Like one adventure like leads to another, like kids kind of like play in a kind of quite a surreal way. They are kind of like, they don't like follow logic, they don't follow narrative, they don't care about that, they just want to just play and do daft things. So the film has that kind of feeling, which is great, but my god, when those adults appear, the scene's just gone forever. Like when this kind of crime story, it is trying to be the Goonies, it is trying to be like the kids stumble into this actually quite dangerous situation and like outsmart the adults in very kind of funny ways. And as a kid, watching that kind of film is hilarious. You love to see kids outsmart grown-ups. It's like so entertaining. And if I was a young person watching this probably would have been like a riot for me. But there was just some of those scenes just dragged. It just felt they were dull. The performances from the adults were not good. And I feel like the director really should have worked better with the adults. He's clearly good at working with the kids.
He's one of them.
Is he one of them? Which one?
He's the brother.
He's wearing like a black t-shirt.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's the one that like forgets the bullets.
Oh my god, he was one of the worst. I'm sorry. You need to like sort that out. He was terrible. Like yeah.
Jamie.
I'm so sorry, but like you were not good. So yeah, like I feel like it just felt like, you had to cast his pals or something, and they were just crap. So yeah, and like Kelly was saying, the scenes will just drag, and it's far too long. So yeah, it was just disappointing in that way because it's a shame because it does look great, the design is great, the cinematography is great, the costumes are fantastic. It's just the script sucked, and the last half hour really dragged. I was watching it last night, and my god, it was like very tough watching.
I'm gonna say there were bits in the because I also felt like some scenes really struggled. There were in the end, I actually kind of came back around eventually. Like there's this as part of them getting their MacGuffin or whatever, this egg that they're trying to get, they have to do this, like they have to invent a dance, which is very, I don't know, that's very like, medieval, I guess. That's very like bardy. They have to sort of like, win this in a dance. And it's like quite a compelling little scene. Like they actually, the kids are obviously having a really fun time with it, but it's still shot really beautifully. And then by the end, when we return to the mother and like conclude the story, it actually feels really nice, really neat, very sentimental and sweet. And it's just like, I think that the middle is sort of where I struggled the most, but I kind of like started strong and ended strong.
I agree. The first 20 minutes are good and the ending's good. I thought the scene in the club was weird. I don't know. There was something off about that. And like, are they kind of trying to imply that guy's a paedophile? Why did you want those kids to dance? I just found it weird. I'm sorry. I didn't like it.
I think I didn't like it. Is it like the logic of it was like this kid logic, right? Like the worst thing that someone can do is embarrass you. Like you're not even in danger. It's that they can like, they have power over you and they can like, it's like a bully, right? I think was what it was meant to be, but it is strange that he gets
like captured by the evil guys and he's like, hold out his arm, like, let me break this kid's arm. And it's like, that's, if you're actually like a hardened criminal poacher who's like trying to, you do something way more fucked up than that. But like to a kid, the idea of having your arm broken is like the worst thing in the world. Like that's terrifying. Yeah. So it's like everything, like the threats, they're all kind of amplified through this. And
I will also say that I know not that much about poaching at all. It's not one of my areas of expertise.
Yeah, holier than that.
But I feel if you're a poacher, you're probably not going to want to risk like murder and kidnapping as additional charges. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel that the way that the poachers were so willing to like up their criminality at every turn, it's like I'm not sure that this is how it is.
Also, is that plot not the exact plot of Princess Mononoke? Where they're trying to get the king of the forest. Like,
but he was really inspired by that. Like,
I just thought it was like, why are you not like making the reference more explicit? Because it's like the middle part just becomes that plot, but without a lot of the kind of Miyazaki elements. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, the middle, it should have been like compressed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up for watching the kid eat sausages and stuff like that. That's fun. Like, I liked when it was goofy in kid stuff, but when it was adult stuff, it just wasn't interesting.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. But, who are you going to believe? It's out on the 7th of June. I believe it might be playing at the GFT.
Probably.
Does anyone look that up quickly? I can look that up.
Where's pizza when you need him? I'm going to get my
but it's the kind of film you could probably find online, I'm pretty sure.
Pirate it.
No, it's the kind of film that will come online very quickly. It'll be,
There's at least a screening at the Cameo.
There you go.
So on the 7th of June.
It's at the Cameo on the 7th of June. It played at GFF back in March. It was a big success there. People loved it at the film festival. Yeah, it was part of the film festival. like that's why I wanted to watch it. People were saying it's like one of their favourite films at the festival.
Oh.
I was just a bit surprised it wasn't very good.
Are you surprised, Jamie? Are you surprised that you didn't agree with everyone? Are you surprised by that?
Yeah. No. That was Riddle of Fire.
Great. Do you want to do the Letterboxd rating right now?
Yes, let's break Peter's tradition because Peter's let's face it. Well, Peter's not here.
We do it at the
why
end.
are we doing it at the end?
I don't know.
Peter, we're having a mutiny. We're not doing it at the end anymore. We're going to do it after the film. So let's do the Letterboxd rating. Annie, what do you want to put?
I gave it 4 stars.
4 stars, Ellie.
I'll give it 4 stars.
You soft touches. It's a 2-star film. Sorry. So that's what's that? 3 point something. We'll say 3.5.
No, we won't. We'll figure it out. It's what? 8 plus 2, 10. Oh, yeah, it is 3.5.
Yeah,
Fuck.
it's 3.3.
God damn it.
3.3 is not bad.
No, that's
I
fine.
think that's fair.
Yeah, that is fair.
And it played Can, what
Yeah.
who are you going to believe, Can or me? Okay, now since June is Pride Month, some of our favourite local cinemas are programming a bunch of good queer films. So at the Cameo in Edinburgh, they have this thing called the Out Season, which features God's Own Country, Pride, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Funeral Parade of Roses. And then in Glasgow, at the GFT, it has its own Pride season. That features Bound, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Cabaret, Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert again. And they also have the GFT's Queer Cinema Sundays, which are really good actually. I went last month, went to see Bad Education. They're showing Donna Ditch's Desert Hearts this month, which I have not seen actually.
It's good.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So given all these great queer films are on our cinemas, we thought we'd sort of give our thoughts and pick out some of the highlights and maybe say some of the films we'd like to have seen in the programme. Who wants to go first here? Ellie, do you want to
I can
start?
go first, yeah.
I do love, that the singular straight person on this podcast is away this week.
Yeah.
This is our unauthorized Pride episode.
What did he pick? Rambo or something? Come on, Peter.
Okay, carry on.
Yeah, I think that these programs look great. I think that like when it comes to Pride, like these are Pride films, like in the sense that like they are very triumphant. They are very kind of like, Pride itself. Pride 2014 is the best Pride film. Like no matter what, if you've actually like lived through the 80s, if you're like a, what do they call it, baby queer or something like that, like then you're going to enjoy this. Straight audiences will love it as well. It's a great like film about allyship. It's a great film about solidarity. Bound, I watched on my Wachowski's kick, and that's just great because it's like this very like sizzling queer romance, which isn't even anything to really do with it. It's more just about like this great thriller about trying to fuck over your crime boss husband and winning one over on him. Like, it's just great. So I was kind of like, if I were to do my own Pride programming, then I don't necessarily know that it would be as like, it would invoke those kinds of feelings, those like great triumphant feelings, but rather just be like a point of interest to anyone who has a real penchant for like queer film history. So I have watched a 1969 comedy film. So this is 1969. So the last of the Hays Code would have been just swept out of Hollywood. This would have been Midnight Cowboy winning the Best Picture. But this is, of course, a comedy. It's like for more broad audiences. It's called The Gay Deceivers, and it follows two straight young men, normal American dudes, Danny and Elliot, I think is Elliot the name? And pretty much, Danny is hoping to soon, move up north with his girlfriend. Elliot is a local lifeguard who's really enjoying the fact that like women fawn over him because he's really big and muscular. But they only have one problem, and that's that, in their words, they don't want to get their butts blown off in Vietnam. So in order to dodge the draft, they create this fabrication that they're actually gay lovers and therefore ineligible to serve in the armed forces. The film opens with Beethoven's Fifth playing over Uncle Sam pointing at the screen saying America wants you, over footage of people protesting and burning their draft slips. So it's a very like Pride, it has this completely separate social issue at its heart. And as it turns out, the plan doesn't quite go successfully. The actual deception is at the very beginning. But Danny soon realizes that this army recruiter is actually stalking them to corroborate this lie they've told. So they kind of have to impulsively, these two bros, buy a 1-bedroom cottage in a gay neighborhood and keep up this lie. The film was mentioned in the celluloid closet, where Vito Russo points out that the actor Michael Greer, who plays their actually gay neighbor and landlord Malcolm, he's actually gay in real life, or he was actually gay in real life, and he was supposedly trying to steer the direction and screenwriting of the film to be more respectful, to be a more fair depiction of gay people. So it's like, here's the thing, this is 1969, and it's very much what we would now consider highly stereotypical, right? Like, all of the gay characters that we meet, they're all limp-wristed, they all speak with a lisp, they cook and clean in frilly aprons and stuff like that. They're a stereotype, and that's both so that casual audiences who aren't super familiar with gay culture, or I suppose in 1969 aren't familiar with gay people, have something to go off of. If you watch the 1970 film adaptation of the play Boys in the Band, like, this is a film where they like look down the camera and essentially explain to the audience what coming out of the closet means, or what a menage a trois means, because these are terms that aren't in the popular like nomenclature of the 60s. So it can be like a little bit like that in The Gay Deceivers. The gay characters themselves can be, like, as a performance, very over the top. But that also gives, you know, Elliot and Danny this template to emulate, right? Because even before they move, Danny gets frustrated at Elliot for, like, goofing on that they're gay in front of everyone, because straight guys love to pretend to be gay as a goof. Like, that's not really changed in 55 years. And, like, that's the most interesting thing about this film, is that as much as it is for these naive 1960s comedy audiences to go and see a farcical romp about gay people, it's now become this weird artifact that actually gives us a lot of insight into how straight people think. Like, at one point, you know, Danny's girlfriend is coming over, and he's like, shit, like, I don't want my girlfriend to see this pink cottage that I now live in with my bro. It's got 1 bedroom. It's covered in Greek statues. So he's like, why don't we, like, go on a walk around the neighborhood or whatever? And they pass by a gay club, and the girlfriend's like, oh, Danny, that's one of those gay clubs that my friends keep telling me about. We got to go inside. We got to go check it out. And it's like, if you go to CC Bloom's on a Saturday night, it'll be mostly straight people. Like, that's not changed either, right? So it's just like, to further that point, when rumors start to circulate about, you know, what's their parents come and visit, they're like, what's all this? Like, are you guys going to get a second bed? Come on, what's going on here? Elliot loses his job as a lifeguard because he can't be employed with the protection of children if he's gay. So, like, this is one of those ones where, like, casual audiences are being steered to understand some of the hardships of gay life. And that's all tangential, right? Because remember, the film is about straight people trying to dodge the draft. But it just becomes really interesting. They kind of do go on this transformation. It's not the most, like, you know, scathing political allegory ever. It's not as, I think, even as universally appealing as something like Pride. But it is just a point of fascination. And, like, you know, I can't really talk about the best part of the film is its twist ending. So if you're actually planning on going in blind, then, you know, skip ahead a little bit. But as it turns out, the very end of the film, the army recruiters that have been stalking them are indeed trying to find out whether or not they're gay or straight, but only because they're gay and they don't want straight men in the army. It's hard. It is a comedy, and it's a really goofy comedy. It's a really unrealistic comedy, but there's those just little intonations that show us into, like, the queer way of thinking, the straight way of thinking that, like, cinema very successfully preserves.
That sounds fucking great.
It's a great film.
I've never heard of it.
I've not heard of that either, but it sounds fun.
It's just, it was a deep cut. I had to go with the deep cut. Go for it. What was I going to talk about? Love Simon.
Well, that's the thing. I would actually, I mean...
Yeah, that's on my list, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting in deep cut, because I actually do think, I do like all these films, but I do think some of them are a little bit overplayed. Like, I feel like, you know, like, there's maybe one, like, Funeral Parade of Roses I haven't seen, but otherwise, you know, I think they're very familiar to people. Yeah. You know, have all been screened in the last few years. And well, first of all, what would you say you must see from this list? And then,
so I am going to see God's Own Country tomorrow, because I think that is fucking great.
Yep.
I think we talked about it. When did we do our White Boy of the Month episode?
That was
the Josh O'Connor. What was that last
like a month
ago. The one before that?
A couple weeks ago.
So we talked about it then, but it's just a very like, very earthy film, as it were.
Yes. More the ways than one.
Yeah, just, like, very sexy, very kind of, like, star-making turns. And I think an imagination of queerness that lies outside of like the urban space, which I think is often like where we think about queerness. And it's just like, yeah, really is a lot about desire. It was interesting what you were saying, and you were saying this earlier, Jamie. I don't think we were recording then, but that a lot of like queer film programming often is about like that celebration of it. And there are obviously so many facets to it. When I think about queer cinema, the ones that I am most drawn to tend to be about queer desire specifically. So God's Own Country is really, really good at that, at kind of showing those moments of like tension and desire, and that builds out like a whole life. Bound is also really good for that. Bound is just, I mean, it's just like, you know, it's that girl in the vest. It's that
so good,
girl
isn't it?
in the fucking vest. It's so fucking good. Yeah.
I can't believe that was the first film. It was just so slick and so cool.
Fucking insane. Yeah. But again, like really, really fucking sexy. Goes to show that all you need in any couple is just like one person in a vest, one person in a little slip dress. Doesn't matter who is who. Just one. One of each. And so that's like really, really fucking fun. And would be really cool to see actually on a big screen. I think that one. Because it has like a real, it's not even that it's like very action based. It has like, God, what is it called? Sorry, I'm like blanking. Like that kind of
tension.
No.
Visceral?
No, it's more like that kind of style of film that would like play like in late night kind of cinemas in like the 80s.
Noir, Grindhouse.
Yeah, kind of like noir, like that almost like, it makes me think of like Variety, which I know is like a porn cinema, but it has that kind of quite like dingy.
It's quite pulpy.
Pulpy, yes, that's the word. Thank you. Sorry. Jesus Christ. It has that real like pulpy effect, which I think is actually really cool to see in a cinema, because it used to be that was, cinemas weren't only built around these tentpole films, and kind of going back to how they would screen films in the 80s and 90s can be quite exciting. In terms of what I would program, I think it would be probably quite similar, to be honest, in tone, but just maybe ones that, like you say, haven't been overplayed as much. So I was thinking last night about Stage Beauty, which is, I always describe it as just like the gay and horny version of Shakespeare in Love. So it's about a actor in Charles II's reign, actually. So it's a little bit after the Elizabethan period, played by Billy Crudup, a man. And he is like one of the most famous actors in the UK, but is like famous for playing a woman. So it's still back in the day when women weren't allowed to be on stage. And then midway through the film, the law changes and men are no longer allowed to play women. And so he has like built his whole career on this like kind of gender fluidity. He has this male lover who suddenly is no longer interested in him when he's this very like masculine person. And it's just like so horny, so sexy, so like really good. It's such a gay film. And it's because of the relationships, but it's also like how it thinks about like gender and how it thinks about this stuff as being like fluid and porous. And there's something really sexy about that. There's a Canadian film called Closet Monster. Have you seen that?
Yeah, just totally. Yeah.
Really? Oh, I love Closet Monster. It was described, I think, when it came out as like a cross between Xavier Dolan and David Cronenberg. And it has this like slight body horror aesthetic. And it's about this kid who really wants to get into like special effects and is really interested in body horror, and he's closeted, and his kind of like coming of age. And there are these really interesting little magical realist moments. He has a hamster who is voiced by Isabella Rossellini, which is also just a very gay thing to have. And it's about like his relationship with his father, and about like the kind of micro traumas and also like actual traumas that can kind of build up through a childhood, and how kind of that butts up against your desire, but it's just like really moody and sexy. And then Watermelon Woman by Cheryl Dunn. Is that how you say her name? Cheryl? Yeah, I think so. Which is about a woman who works in a video store and is gay. That's like mostly the plot. But again, it's like really...
Yeah, she's doing a PhD on like a woman who's like in the... I've not actually seen it, but like I was writing about it recently. She was doing a PhD on a woman who was like a star.
She'd been erased.
Yeah. It's like she was a black actor who was described as the Watermelon Woman, and she's kind of disappeared from the record.
Yeah, so she's kind of doing this kind of archival process, but she's also just like in this record store. And there's this like bit, oh God, I wish I could remember what it is, but there's this kind of excerpt that's always on like the Mubi Instagram or the Criterion Instagram, which is like, oh my god, like, yeah, it's like, oh, all you do now you don't have a girlfriend is watch these fucking films. And it's like, okay. And that is also just like really sexy. She like meets a woman at the video store, and there's a really, really good sex scene. And again, it thinks about like desire in a very, I always think of that kind of criticism that came out about Call Me By Your Name, which is that the book was so full of like basically cum and like body fluids, and that the film had sanitized that. And I think the films that feel the sexiest are the ones that don't sanitize that, and not even necessarily in like a particularly visceral way, but they think about it really as like an encounter between bodies and like encounters of desire. So yeah, I think those would be sick.
I agree. Yeah, like from this list, I think I definitely, like I was saying, want to see Pray for Roses. Also want to see The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, because I've not seen it since I was a kid, and I remember loving it so much.
I've seen the stage show, but I've never seen the film.
Yeah, it was like a riot. It was like that part with like that part of the time when like Australia was making all these great films, like Muriel's Wedding, and like what else is like like Romeo and Juliet and things like that. Like all these kind of great Australian movies. I love that so much. But yeah, I would say that some of these films are a little bit overplayed. I can see why they're programmed. Like I think like in Pride Month, yeah, of course you want to have films that have happy endings and queer joy, which is actually quite a small number of films, because actually quite a lot of queer films are dark and seedy and like delve into the tougher parts of being gay or the kind of darker sides. So I think that's what's missing. So for the program, so I would add in some of those. I would also say though, and interesting you mentioned Canadian films. I actually think the best cinema of the last few years has been Canada. If you think of like Quebecois, well, there's Xavier Dolan obviously, but I was thinking of, I don't know if you saw a film called Genesis from a few years ago. It's Philippe Lesage, really fantastic. I would say Closet Monster. It's not French Canadian, but is it French Canadian? No, it's not French Canadian.
I don't think it's French Canadian, no, but it is Canadian.
There's also one of the best queer films that's kind of disappeared, but do you ever see Crazy? It's the Jean-Marc Vallée film, before he went to Hollywood and made like the Dallas Buyers Club. It's like a kid who's like obsessed with like David Bowie, and it's like very good coming-of-age movie. So I would say weirdly Quebec films are excellent. But
there
also
was the one that, sorry to interrupt, but I think I showed at GFF this year, and I'm trying to remember what it was called. Did we even talk about it on the podcast?
We did.
About
I can't
the drag
remember. Yeah, I literally brought that up on the way over. I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but that was also Quebecois, like French Quebecois.
Exactly.
That was good.
So yeah, there's something around there. There's a whole bunch of good films. Yeah, what is that film called? We did review it like a few months ago.
I remember it being quite a normal name, so I don't even really know what to Google.
Yeah, it was like one. Okay, you keep talking and then I'll interrupt you.
So I was going to say, I was going to say I want to delve into the darker side. So I was going to say I want a bit of Fassbinder in there. Something like
Solo. It was called Solo.
It's called Solo. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want a bit of Fassbinder. I don't know if you ever seen any films by. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. It's Jorge Pedro Rodriguez. So he's made some of the best queer films over the last few years. He made a film called, what's it called? What was it? Was Somebody Who Loves Birds?
Ornithologist.
The Ornithologist, which was fantastic. And then he made a film called O Fantismo.
Okay.
Where it's maybe 20 years old now, but it's like so dark. It's like about this kid who's like a garbage collector in like Lisbon, and he goes down this just like insane kind of like path of desire when he finds this guy he loves, and he goes on these kind of weird kind of like flagellating kind of like sexual encounters, and it ends with him like in this kind of like gimp suit, like in a like a dump. It's like such a weird film, like so dark, and but like his films are like so visceral and so very sexy, but like very kind of dark, and like about the kind of twisted sort of dark side of being queer. So like he's really worth watching. And yeah, like I say, Fassbinder, any of his films, Corel would also be another one I would love to see on the big screen. I would say I did watch Bound on the big screen a year ago at the GFT. It was one of the funnest cinema experiences I've ever had. It was probably the queerest cinema audience you've ever been. So I'd say actually, if you have a chance to see Bound on the big screen at the GFT, I would take it, because last time it was on, it was an absolute riot. Just take the month to like watch lots of queer movies, I would say.
Yeah.
So these ones are good, but there's plenty else out there.
There's plenty else. And Then We Dance. This is just like very random, but it's just coming to mind. Do you remember And Then We Dance? That was fucking the Georgian one.
Yes, that was amazing.
Oh, that was so sexy. And his next film is coming out this summer. I think it showed at Cannes or somewhere.
Yeah,
already
that's
shown.
he's a Georgian filmmaker.
Yes, yeah. And that was that like scene where they're all dancing to Robin's Honey.
Oh my God, yeah, it's so good.
Oh my God, yeah, what a time. You know, you would really like it.
I bet I would,
so good.
That was the problem actually with Solo. It did remind me a little bit of that film.
Yeah, and it just wasn't
as good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So this has made a podcast, I think, people.
Oh my God.
Yeah, amazing. We should say, talking of queer films, though, we are going to be showing one as part of the Cinema Film Club. We're teaming up again with Mubi since it's Pride Month. We're showing a film called Monica. It's a film about coming home, and as queer people might know, it can be quite a traumatic experience coming home. So this is about a transgender woman called Monica, who is from a town in the Midwest. She was thrown out by her transphobic mother, but she's reluctantly returned when her mother gets sick. But her mother's like battling dementia, and actually she comes back to a mother who's a bit nicer and like actually doesn't realise that Monica is her child, and a kind of nice relationship forms. It sounds actually quite a sweet, hopeful film.
It's really lovely.
Oh, you haven't seen it? Yeah,
it came out in Venice like 2 years ago. It's been so, like, there's been such a big gap between its release.
Yeah, well, you should definitely come and see it at the Cinema Film Club then, because it's actually going to go straight to Mubi, so it's actually going to be one of the few chances you get to see it on the big screen. We're going to be at the CCA on the 18th of June, and then we're going to be at the Summer Hall on the 16th of June.
On the 19th of June.
On the 19th of June.
Well,
yes.
That's what it says.
Yes, that's okay. Correct. I've just been dyslexic and turned the 9 to a 6. On the 19th of June. And tickets for that are going fast, but you can get them at theskinny.co.uk/tickets. Love to see you there. Should be a fun time. Next time on the Cine Skinny, what we're going to be doing, I don't know. Peter will be back, so this will be more.
It's not business what we're doing.
It'll be less shambolic.
Peter can decide.
Exactly. Follow us on Twitter. You can contact us on email at cinyskinny@theskinny.co.uk. Anything to say before we leave, guys?
No.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride, yeah.
Pride, babies.
Bye.
Bye.